we all want to grow by acquisition. It sounds fantastic, but it could actually be a nightmare if you make the wrong choice.
In today's episode, Courtney and I sit down with Carey Wallace, the owner of Agency Focus. She is the expert at helping agents during the buying and selling process. And that's exactly what we're going to dive in and discuss today. Everything from the 3 to 5 years of planning and prepping to sell your book of business, to what buyers are looking for, to how healthy is a book. Is your goal as a buyer to buy a really healthy book of business? Or is it to go in and buy a fixer-upper? And so make sure you get your pen and paper handy, because there are all kinds of good information in this one. Let's get ready to go. Hey, welcome to the Insurance Buzz. We are your hosts, Michael and Courtney Weaver, and we have a special guest with us today, Carey Wallace. Carey, how are you?
I'm doing really well. Thanks so much for having me.
I am so excited to have you on. You are the master and expert at mergers and acquisitions when it comes to the insurance industry, valuations of books. If you're looking to buy, what are you looking for? If you're looking to sell, you help them get prepped. So let's actually start there. If you're looking to sell, what do you need to be thinking about, doing, preparing? Like, I'd love to know.
Yeah, I think anyone who's looking to sell, they need to be thinking about what is your time frame and how do you get your agency as healthy as possible before you go into that sale. You don't want to wait until you're ready to leave tomorrow. You want to think about it and actually understand what drives the value of your agency and maximize that value. So the ideal person wants to think about it at least 3, maybe even 5 years in advance in order to get that agency ready to maximize it. Right? I mean, let's be real. There's a lot of people out there that their agency is their largest asset, and you don't want to just happen onto, I'm ready to go tomorrow. You want to actually be planful and think about, how do I maximize it and get it as pretty as possible and as attractive to as many people so you have a lot of demand for your agency.
So let's dive into that. You said healthy. All right. So what does a healthy book of business look like that buyers are interested in?
Yeah. So if you think about it, what drives the value of an agency is it growing? Is it profitable? Is it transferable? So a healthy agency is growing and in a very predictable way. It's also able to do that in a profitable way. So it's being operated in a way that is congruent with what the industry expects. So if I'm a buyer, I want to buy an agency that I don't have to make a lot of changes, especially compensation changes, in order to continue to operate that agency. But the thing people mostly forget about is it transferable? If your clients are only doing business because it's Michael and Courtney, and they're only going to stay if it's Michael and Courtney that run that agency, it's not transferable. You're going to lose the revenue that is your very value. I mean, the reality is independent agents are valuable because it's predictable. And we know that we have one of the highest retention rates of any kind of business in the world. So if it's not transferable because of a person, because of a carrier, because of a niche, because of anything that prevents that predictability from being there, your value is going to decrease. So once you know what those things are and what your actual risk factors are, you can start working on it, right? So let's say it's your predictability and your relationships. Will broaden the relationships with the other people in your agency. Therefore, it stays, and it's not just dependent on you. It's dependent on the team. So that's what I mean by healthy. Is it profitable? Is it growing? Mm-hmm. Is the performance what it should be? And is it transferable? And if you can answer those things, you're going to have far more people interested in your agency than if you can't answer those things positively.
Is there some kind of app or data or some kind of like magical thing that I can take all of these numbers and say, okay, I score this. I'm a prime candidate and I need to improve in this category?
Yeah, I mean, there's something called a fair market valuation. So the process that I go through in order to do that health check is to do a valuation of an agency. And so we look at your financials for 5 years and we benchmark you against what other agencies that size are allocating their resources. So there are benchmarks. That's the beauty of our industry. There are published benchmarks that tell you where you should be. There's some shortfalls with the benchmarks because they're focused on larger agencies. So if you're a smaller agency, those are benchmarks we're actually building and publishing in Agency Focus. So, but there are benchmarks that tell you how much should I spend on salaries? How much should I spend on my office? How much should I spend on marketing, technology, all the things that you'd be investing in as a business owner? And if you're outside the benchmark, it's not bad unless your performance isn't stellar and you're over investing. So you can start to look at how are they working for you? And then what does that leave over for profitability? And that profit number, or dare I say EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. That's the number that gets multiplied to tell the value of your agency. So if you're not operating at least a 30% EBITDA, you're leaving some money on the table. And you need to figure out, how can I run this business more efficiently and profitably so I can maximize that value? It's a great question. And the reality is, the benchmarks are changing. So for a lot of agencies that are investing, they're actually increasing their productivity because they're investing in tech, or they're investing in virtual assistants, or they're investing in RPA. There's a lot of things. So even the published benchmarks, just know those are some numbers that are going to move and shift as innovation continues to happen in our industry.
So what is the multiplier right now in the insurance industry?
So that changes based on your volume. So here's the thing. The average, 83% of independent agents are under 1.25 million. So let's just use $1 million in revenue as our guide, because that's really almost where the bell curve is, where the bulk of agencies are probably 750,000 to $1 million in revenue, right in that area. Okay. For $1 million agency, the multiplier depends on, are you selling internally? Are you selling externally? Are you going to sell externally with a bank loan, or is there an organization that's interested in your agency that maybe is private equity backed? That doesn't typically happen at $1 million agency. It has to be a higher volume in order to command those multiples. And sadly, those are the multiples that are published. So if I'm sitting as $1 million agency, I think I can sell my agency for 12 times EBITDA, when the reality is the average is right around 7.5 times EBITDA if you're very, very well run. So, and you also need to know how to calculate your EBITDA and what risk factors you have. So, for instance, if I'm an agency and I place 70% of my business with a carrier that is unlikely to appoint a new buyer that doesn't have that carrier, my agency isn't as transferable as other agencies might be. That's a risk factor. My multiple will be lower than an agency that is more transferable, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm giving you the range, but it can be anywhere from 6 times EBITDA to 9 times EBITDA. You know, there's a wide range, and it depends what the agency's health is and what the risk factors are.
So I have a question. So
sure.
You say transferable. Mm-hmm. In your health report, how are you going to help a seller understand if the book they're buying is transferable? For example, the example you gave earlier, like, oh, the clients love Michael and Courtney Weaver. All right. So if you buy this, how can you actually determine that when you're going in and looking at buying a book of business?
Sure. That's a great question. I have to talk to them. I mean, the numbers only tell me so much, but I have to get to the story behind the numbers. So let's talk about your client concentration just in general. There's a couple different things that you would look at. First of all, I'm going to look at what is your top 20 clients in your book of business. Who are they placed with? who's responsible for them in your AMS? What is their size? How much revenue do they actually represent related to your entire book of business? And for some agencies, they actually are able to provide me their entire book of business. So I'm able to actually say, what is your top 50? What is your top 100? What does your top 1,000 clients look like? And from there, I can start to say, what is the areas of concentration with those clients? How long have they been with your agency? Which carriers are they with? What is the loss ratio for that block of business? Like, there's a lot of things to think about. So if I see one of your clients makes up 10% of your total revenue, you're far more risky than if it makes up less than 1%. To be quite honest, I've seen an agency where the largest client actually makes up 45% of their total revenue. Imagine buying that agency. Mm-hmm. So think about this. When people say, oh, an agency's value is just 2 times revenue, right? Well, you tell me, would you pay the same for $1 million agency if one client made up 45% of it versus one that made up 1% of it? That's my point. Like, there's a lot of myths out there and a lot of things that people think, but the risk, you have to dig deeper and you have to ask. So, and then the book of business report isn't always accurate. It might say, Michael is responsible for 15 out of the 20 top clients, but the reality is you have a CSR that does all of the work for that, or all of and they have the relationship with that client. So I have to ask the question and really make that clear. And when we go through a transition, we actually ask the seller, which ones do you think are at risk? Which ones do you think are questionable? You're not 100% sure. And which ones do you think it's green? Like they really don't deal with me. My name is on it, but it really doesn't matter. And then we build a transition plan to say, okay, your red and your yellows, we got to put a plan in place over a period of time to introduce people. Because the reality is what that owner says about the future owner is what their clients will think. So if they think they're in great hands, fantastic. If they're silent or have any kind of hesitation, that client's going to go because they don't have confidence they're going to be taken care of, right? So there's a lot to it. It's not just numbers, that's for sure.
This sounds like succession planning. Is essentially
definitely
what you're doing. When are you coming in? And you said 3 to 5 years in advance. When are you having these conversations of, we need to start transferring these customers?
So, a lot of people come to me to get a valuation, and they come for lots of different reasons. And about 75% of the clients that reach out that want help are thinking, I want to transition my book of business internally. I have a thought process in mind. I need to get an idea of what the value of my agency is. And can I even is it possible for me to transition this internally? That's about 75%. That number is dwindling because the multiples between internal and external are starting to really widen the gap. The multiples continue to rise. So, and then about 15% are thinking, I probably want to sell, and I need to know the offers that I'm getting, are they in the right ballpark? What should I even be thinking those should be? And then there's some that are just trying to plan. Like they really don't know. They don't have anything in mind, but they're trying to plan. And then I have some that are like, I want to sell by December, and in October, they want a valuation done. I can't do anything to help that. That agency's value is what their value is. They can't really do anything to strengthen that agency. But a lot of people, my goal would be to get everyone to do it 3 years in advance so you can do something with the work that I provide to you. And most people do. Like, if you're thinking of internal, you're starting earlier. You're not waiting until the absolute end. So luckily, I get to work with a lot of people and help them and have these conversations and continue to engage after the valuation. That's the fun work, actually,
Do you help them broker the deals? Like, do you help them find sellers for their book of business? So
I am not a broker in the sense I do not take a percentage of a deal, ever. I decided when I started my business that I wasn't going to have that structure. And quite frankly, there's some really incredible brokers out there. If you want someone to take your agency to market, I refer to them regularly. I will actually consult with agents to help them through the process because I know that it feels very fragmented. Like you can do my valuation and then I have to go to someone else to get the agreement. And then I have to go to someone else for tax advice. And it's first of all intimidating and you do it once. So I actually quarterback that process and stay with an agency owner and help them, but I get a consulting fee, not a percentage of the deal. So, yeah.
So since we're talking about financing, what does that look like? Are you seeing a lot of, I guess, number one, financing banks, I would assume, are stepping in and doing a lot of the financing to help buyers buy books of businesses?
Yep. Yeah. So there's some really great banks in our industry that, I don't know if the average agency knows this, but I think we all know that independent insurance agents are relationship building or relationship driven. So the knee-jerk reaction is to go to your local bank if you want to do something like this. But the reality is your local bank doesn't really understand where the value of an independent agency is. So a local bank typically looks at the balance sheet to say, are there assets that I can hold as collateral in order to lend you money? An independent agency might not have a very strong balance sheet because all of their values in their book of business, which sits on their profit and loss statement. So I would just urge you, if you go to a bank and they don't understand your business, they could underlend to you if you're going through this process. There's some great banks that are specialized in lending. So Live Oak Bank, Insure Bank, Westfield Bank, they all know your business and they will help you through the process. And they are so good at what they do. Please don't make the mistake to go local and only local. Please go to someone who understands your business. Because I think it's a mistake, and I would hate to see you miss out on an opportunity because you didn't have the right lender.
Yep. Do you ever see sellers self-finance to buyers?
Oh, yeah. Owner finance notes. Yes. So I do a whole thing on this, actually. So if you think about it, interest rates have increased significantly over the past 18 months. So when interest rates were low, there was a lot of buyers in the marketplace. Now that interest rates are higher, the buyers either have to have a really strong balance sheet so they can have a higher down payment in order to meet the multiples that are out there. There's still plenty of buyers. Don't get me wrong. Like people growing by acquisition is a real thing, but you have to get creative in the financing. So now you see a bank loan coupled with an owner financed for the down payment or the difference that can't be financed by a bank. A bank is only going to lend you 75% of, they want to make sure that you're only putting 75% of the profitability to finance that or to satisfy that debt. So they're not going to give you 100% of the agency, and they're also going to make sure that they get paid. So there's this gap, and there's an owner finance note oftentimes when it's an internal sell. So let's just think about that. If you don't get a valuation, you don't go to a lender to know what will cash flow, and you just arbitrarily pick a price for your agency based on what you know or what you think you know, and you set this price and your next generation buys it from you, and now they're paying a note and they can't invest in the ongoing operation of the agency, it could actually hurt them. It could hurt you and hurt the agency. So about 40% of internal deals that are owner financed get renegotiated, which means, doesn't that sound like a fun Thanksgiving between your family? Like, let's not do that, right?
Oh my gosh.
Right. So it's helpful to get some data and know what you're doing when you set this price and set the time and do that. Owner finance note, there's just so many opportunities to not put the structure together that makes sense, So
if you're buying an agency, what are the red flags to look for?
So if you're buying an agency, I'd say, do you even know what agency is going to strengthen your agency? Are you clear on what your target is? And if you haven't looked at your agency to know, What am I looking to do and what's going to strengthen me overall for when I eventually exit and want to sell my agency? Number one, there's a lot of people that get excited because there's an opportunity. It's on my desk. I really want to do an acquisition. Therefore, I'm going to make it work. So number one, does it fit with what actually fits with your business? And what I mean by that is, what does their average customer look like? What is the behavior of their customers? Are they paying in cash and coming in the office, or are they a digital agency? Like, what is the behavior and how's it going to impact your operation if you buy this agency and you also get their team, get their level of expertise with technology? Like, there's a lot of things that aren't going to show up on numbers on a spreadsheet that could be major red flags that don't fit with your business. So I think getting really clear on who you are and who you're looking for helps you make those decisions that don't become emotional decisions, that actually are grounded in really thoughtful strategy rather than just wanting to get a deal. Because listen, we all want to grow by acquisition. It sounds fantastic, but it could actually be a nightmare if you make the wrong choice. So you got to look for fit from a carrier standpoint, from a technology standpoint, from a culture standpoint. There's lots of things to think about. And sometimes the carrier, I mean, let's talk about it right now. We're in the middle of a hard market. There's not a lot of new appointments being handed out. So making sure that you can actually obtain the appointments from the carriers that you don't have is a really big piece, because you might be thinking, great, I'm going to buy this book of business. And now you're looking at a book roll and you have no idea what that commission structure is going to be wherever you place that book of business, and you didn't do your homework. So there's a lot of things to think about.
Is there a market for individuals that are ultimately looking for maybe not a healthy book of business to acquire, to go in and almost like flip that if they wanted to, kind of like a real estate market, like go in, fix it up, grow it, flip it in 2, 3, 4 years?
It's so funny that you asked that. I literally just did a study. I benchmarked an agency for them to define what their acquisition profile should be. And their profile was, if it's a healthy agency, this is what it should look like. If it's a fixer-upper, this is what it should look like, because they have incredible infrastructure inside this agency. So they can take a book that's been forgotten, that isn't account rounded, that isn't as efficient as it could be, and actually be strategic about where they place that business, and account round where they can make that a far more valuable book of business than the one that they purchased for. So they're going to be paying a multiple nowhere near 7 times, by the way. And they're going to be combining it with their agency, their infrastructure, their talent, their technology. And by combining that, their agency will be far more valuable than what the two were independently, 100%. So not everybody should be looking for the healthiest, but you have to know what to do and how to quantify that to know what to offer for the one that isn't as valuable. I mean, I think the mistake is, if we just look at the top line revenue, you'd pay the same for both of those agencies because of their revenue level. And you should never be paying that. You should be discounting that book that's unhealthy or a fixer upper, just like a house, right? Like if you didn't remodel your bathroom and your kitchen, you're not going to get the same for the one that put the money in and actually made it look beautiful, right? Yep. So same thing.
So what is, out of curiosity, what is the multiplier range on an unhealthy book of business that would be more of a fixer-upper?
It would be at the lower end. So if a book of business, if we're not talking about people and it's actually a multiple of revenue, that it's a book, it's a small enough that we would actually apply a multiple of revenue, that could be closer to 1.25 times revenue, 1.5 times revenue. Like, the other thing is, how you're paying for a book of business will impact the price you would pay for that book. So what I mean by that is, if you want all your money up front and you want to walk away, I will offer you a lower price because I'm taking all the risk as the buyer. But if you're willing to take half down or 60% down or even 70% down, and then the rest of it is dependent on renewals, now you're taking some of the risk, and you could get upside with the renewals as well. Now your price goes higher than what it would be if you wanted all your money up front. So time, mechanism, and price are all combined and they work together. So you really need to know what's most important to that seller in order to know what price, what time, and what mechanism would be appropriate. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I feel like this is a dating app. This is literally matchmaking. Carey, you have no idea. Michael was so excited for this interview because it's fascinating to understand this world, and hearing you go through all of this of matching the buyer with the seller and the books together. There's so much in it. But you said something. You said the transition for you afterwards is the fun part. What does it look like after we go through this process?
Yeah, so that's actually where the real work starts. Like, everybody thinks, oh my gosh, I got to get through it. I got to get to the close day. Well, once you buy the book of business, you got to transition it. You got to actually onboard that team. You got to actually put those things together, mesh the cultures. Like, that's where the work actually begins. All that other stuff, this was the easy part, but now you've got to put it in place and make sure you can run that agency profitably. And, you know, for me, that's also where the satisfaction comes, because hopefully you paid a fair price for a book, and then you're able to start to see the upside of what your investment looks like as you apply what you bring to the table as a buyer to that book and start seeing, start reaping the benefits of it. But it takes some time and it takes a lot of patience. And if you haven't done your due diligence and you haven't asked all the right questions, there could be major surprises in that, and that typically means your retention rate suffers and what you thought you bought is no longer with you, which is not good. Or you lose people in the process and they were the key to keeping those customers or keeping that book of business intact. So, you got to make sure that you asked enough questions and you're setting yourself up for success. But it is the fun part. I mean, this is all about relationships, and I love how businesses work, and it's all people. Like, I know, I understand I work in numbers, but I really love the story behind the numbers, which is all people, right? That's the fun part. Yeah.
Yep. So right now in the current market we're in, because it is a hard market, are you seeing a lot of the buyers that are wanting to acquire books? Are they wanting to see those super healthy books that they can just purchase and it's a fairly easy transition? Or are you seeing buyers really want to go in and get those fixer uppers of individuals that may be struggling in today's hard market? Like, what are you seeing right now in today's market?
Yeah, I think there's a mix. So there's a couple things in play. It's not just the hard market. I mean, let's rewind for a second. We just came through COVID, where a lot of agencies weren't prepared for remote work. Well, remote work is here and it's here to stay. And some agencies, like if you're at the end of your career, it's tough to make changes like that. Like, that's a massive cultural change. So there's people that were already kind of weary because of that and the impact that it had. Now add this crazy hiring environment we're in. Like, people know that they have flexibility and there's a lot of movement. We had, they've had so many catchy names for the fact that hiring has changed. Like, there's no two ways around it. And that has actually driven a lot of people to say, this might be my time to go. Like, this might be the thing that I can't overcome. And now comes the hard market on top of it and higher interest rates. So everyone is driven to do things when there's pain. And I'd say there's now pain in the industry for those that may have gone way beyond retirement, way beyond when they should have. Now their agency's not growing. It's not profitable, not as profitable as it could be. And they might be thinking, I might be past the prime and this might be my high. I might not be able to get any better than this. The hard market has artificially increased their premiums because of rate. Mm-hmm. And so they are thinking, this might actually be my high. This is my opportunity. So from a seller standpoint, it's causing more people to contemplate whether or not now is the right time, because the same reason that makes agencies attractive, that renewable income, it also makes it attractive to hold on for a long time. But these other things causing pain are now making those owners question, like, listen, I had a great run, but it's probably time for me to go. So I think buyers are recognizing that, and you have to be savvy enough to know the difference between a healthy agency and one that's past its prime. And if you don't get the advice, you might overpay for something that's a little past its prime. So just using this rule of thumb that 2 times revenue is the thing I'm going to offer, or 2.5 times revenue is what I'm going to offer, it's dangerous. It really is. And buyers need to beware that that's not a one size fits all. If there's anything I hope someone takes from this, is agencies aren't a one size fits all. And you have to got to dig deeper than one number to decide what you're going to do here. So I think there's a market for both. That's a really long answer to, you can be looking for a fixer-upper and find it. You could be looking for a healthy agency and finding it. But with interest rates where they are, I'd say there's more interest in some fixer-uppers at this moment, just because you can do more. Your money goes a little further there.
Yep. Carey, this has been awesome. This is my mind. I could keep this going for probably another 2 or 3 hours. I'm like, this is insane.
I knew it. I knew this is what we were getting into. He was so hyped for this conversation. I do want to talk about the fact that you have your own podcast and you do it with your daughter.
I do.
Tell us what goes down on this podcast.
Yeah. So, I've been doing this for a little bit, where I get to meet with all kinds of agency owners. And honestly, I get to meet with a lot of agency owners that no one knows their name. They don't have a mic in their hand. But they're really building some incredible businesses. And it had been suggested a couple times that I should probably do a podcast and bring some of those people you've never met on and talk about these things. And I thought that's great because, again, I think there's such an opportunity to learn from each other. And, we're not reinventing the wheel here, but learning from experience. And one of the things I love about this industry is people are so willing to share. So I was on a trip actually with a bunch of friends and a bunch of friends from the industry. And I was thinking about building a podcast. And they said, well, who's going to be your co-host? I'm like, I can't figure that out. I don't know. I'm really not sure. And I was like, well, I think I might rotate different agents because I'm not an agent and I'm in this industry and I'm going to hold a mic and somehow be, someone's going to listen to me, like whatever. And, someone suggested, your daughter just entered the industry about 2 years ago. What if you did it with her? And I'm like, oh, do you think people would listen to that? Like, do you think that would be okay? And then I was like, I don't even care. Like the opportunity to do this with my daughter. Yes. And so what's really funny is she was helping me come up with the logo and everything. And she's like, what if I did this with you? And I'm like, that's so funny. Someone suggested, why don't you do it with me? And I think it's brilliant. And you know what? I can't wait to look back and have my grandchildren listen to my daughter and I have conversations and whatever. So it got to the point where it's like, this is a no-brainer. If we get 0 listeners, I don't care because I get to spend some really cool time with my daughter. So yeah. It's pretty fun. So we talk a little bit. She asks some really insightful questions because she's new to the industry. So she'll ask the things that most people won't because they think they should know. And I think it's helpful. And what's even funnier is someone said, you guys have an incredible chemistry. And I'm like, we should. We're mother and daughter. If we don't, I'm in trouble. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I love it. Yeah.
Bigger questions there if you don't have chemistry. That's a whole different thing. I do have to ask, in this process, have there been any fights before your podcast?
We haven't. And I will tell you, I haven't.
Oh, God bless
we
America.
haven't. No. I mean, she definitely on the podcast tells me what I don't know and corrects me, and she doesn't even hesitate. I think my biggest fear with it was I've been in the industry for a while, and I didn't want the podcast to be the Carey Wallace show. I wanted it to be blended. What I've realized is some she's more vocal, some I'm more vocal, and you don't have to force it. But that was my biggest fear. And I was very careful in the first couple episodes to plan it out or whatever. And then I realized it just happens naturally. Stop trying to overplan this. So it was more me, in the beginning trying to avoid that. And what I found is she's she's her mother's daughter and she has no problem speaking up when she wants to speak up. So it is what it is, you know? Yeah. Yeah, you'd love her. She's amazing.
I already. I need to friend her. We need to get matching jackets. Are you kidding me?
Maybe we can come on the pod.
Oh, we'd love that. We would welcome you on the podcast anytime. You would love her. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I'm taking that as an invite.
We're doing
it. Yeah, for
Let's
sure.
do it.
Yeah, for sure.
Since we're already in your ears, where's your podcast? What's it called and how can they listen to it?
So my podcast is called Insurance Refocused. It's everywhere. My daughter's name is Lindsay Wallace, so it's hosted by Carey and Lindsay Wallace. You can find it anywhere and everywhere.
Perfect.
Yes.
And if someone listening to this, Carey, wanted to work with you, find out more about you, follow you, connect with you, what's the easiest way they can do that?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn mostly, and the name of my company is Agency Focus. So you can go to my website, which is www.agency-focus.com. You can email me at Carey@agency-focus.com. You can see me on LinkedIn for sure. But yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Carey, thank you so much. This has been absolutely incredible. I feel like I got a lot smarter today. All right. So today's good. Learned a lot of information I had no idea about. So I'm feeling on top of the world right now. For all of those of you that are listening, thank you so much for your time and support. As always, time is the most valuable and important asset that we all have. Appreciate you spending time with us today. Go out, make it great. Carey, thank you again.